and welcome to the APNU's press conference for today, the 14th of November, 2025. I am Cynthia Rutherford, your moderator this morning. To my right are members of Parliament, Dr. Terrence Campbell and Mr. Ganesh Mahipaul. Today's press statement will be read in two parts. I now invite Dr. Campbell to read the first part.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Good morning. The Partnership for National Unity expresses deep concern over the progressive weakening of the controls, transparency, and accountability mechanisms that were in the Natural Resource Fund framework when passed into law.
Your audio is very poor. They have to.
Our audio is okay.
The mic needs to get to you, Mr. Dan. The audio is poor.
Let me start over for you, Dennis. The Partnership for National Unity expresses deep concern over the progressive weakening of the controls, transparency, and accountability mechanisms that were in the Natural Resource Fund framework when passed into law by the APNU AFC government. What began in 2019 as a carefully designed multi-tiered system to ensure the prudent, transparent, and sustainable management of Guyana's petroleum wealth is continuously being eroded by these government amendments. There is the removal of these guardrails of democracy and prudent management that were in place to prevent abuse and corruption. The government amendments facilitate corruption, abuse, misuse, and mismanagement of the people's wealth through political control and domination by the PPP government. The Natural Resource Fund of 2019, the Natural Resource Fund Act of 2019, was a milestone law enacted under the APNU AFC government. It safeguarded the oil revenues for both present and future generations while insulating the fund from political interference. The Act created robust checks and balances through a Public Accountability and Oversight Committee, a multi-level management structure requiring independent committees to ensure sustainable withdrawal limits, a scientific formula to prevent overuse and preserve long-term stability. The Natural Resource Fund Act of 2021 dismantled those safeguards. The 2021 law replaced independent oversight with a politically appointed board of directors and oversight at a token level. The new withdrawal schedule replaced the overuse and stability formula with fixed percentages that granted broad discretion to the executive. This fundamental shift transformed the NRF from a savings and stabilization tool into a government slush fund. The situation further deteriorated with the Fiscal Enactments Amendment Act of 2024, which further loosened the safeguards and increased the withdrawal limits even more. As a result of this change, the government can access a larger share of the fund each year, enabling accelerated withdrawals with minimal parliamentary scrutiny. This amendment effectively removes the fiscal discipline that protected the fund's sustainability and exposes Guyana's oil wealth to political misuse. It also exposes Guyana to Dutch disease. The APNU warns that these amendments are a complete departure from the fund's original intent. The Natural Resource Fund is no longer a mechanism to secure intergenerational equity or economic stability. It is now a politically controlled pool of revenue that can be withdrawn at the whims and fancies of the government. This dismantling of the institutional safeguards threatens the very economic future of the nation. As a responsible political party focused on putting people first, the APNU calls for the restoration of adequate oversight and the revision of withdrawal rules. Guyana's oil wealth belongs to all its citizens, present and future, not to any government.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. I now invite Mr. Mahipaul to read the second part of the press statement.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Auditor General's 2024 report exposes massive financial irregularities and mismanagement across government. The findings of the Auditor General's report for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2024, paint a deeply troubling picture of financial recklessness, weak oversight, and persistent breaches of accountability laws within several ministries, departments, and regional administrations. The report reveals that there are mismanagement and wastage of billions of taxpayers' dollars. It highlights the glaring deficiencies in contract administration, accounting practices, and internal controls. Overpayment to contractors totaled $1.011 billion in a single year. The Auditor General examined 829 contracts valued at $48.19 billion. He found that $1.011 billion was overpaid to contractors on the 86 contracts administered by various ministries and regions. Of this total, $902 million was overpaid under 37 contracts from key government agencies such as Office of the President, Office of the Prime Minister, Ministries of Foreign Affairs, Local Government, Amerindian Affairs, Agriculture, Public Works, Human Services, Education, Health and Home Affairs, Guyana Police Force, and Guyana Defense Force. An added $109.99 million in overpayments occurred across 9 regional democratic councils. Since these overpayments were from sample audits, it raises a serious concerns that the true extent of financial irregularities could be far greater. The lack of compliance and follow-up on recommendations. Out of 179 recommendations made in the 2023 report, only 48 or 27% were fully implemented. 96 or 54% partially implemented, and 35 or 19% completely ignored. This recurring failure to correct past weaknesses shows a disregard for accountability and financial discipline across multiple ministries and regions. The APNU parliamentary opposition is calling for 1. Deeper forensic audits in all ministries and regions where overpayments and unaccounted funds were discovered. 2. Public disclosure of recovery efforts, including names of engineers who facilitated and contractors who benefited from overpayments. 3. Independent oversight of ministries with repeat audit violations, especially health, agriculture, local government, and human services. 4. Strengthening of internal audit departments and real-time digital monitoring of public contracts to prevent abuse. The 2024 Auditor General's report exposes a disturbing pattern of fiscal indiscipline under the current administration. The overpayments, expired drugs, missing vouchers, and idle funds represent not only financial wastage, but a breach of the people's trust. The government must stop treating these findings as routine bureaucratic issues. These are symptoms of systemic corruption, weak governance, and absence of accountability. The time has come for decisive action and full transparency. Guyanese deserve better stewardship of their nation's resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mahipaul. I now invite questions from today's press statement. I see the hand of Mr. Harris. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. This question is for Mr. Mahipaul. Sir, how is the Public Accounts Committee likely to be constituted this time around? What is the size or how many opposition members sit on this committee? And during the last committee, you made recommendations for police action. How many of those recommendations were heeded?
Thank you, Adam. Let me start off by saying that the Public Accounts Committee is a standing committee of the National Assembly. So the life of a parliament, when that life comes to an end and you start a new parliament, it does not disrupt the work of standing committees. So exactly where we stopped in the 12th Parliament with that PAC, there is where we will commence again in the 13th Parliament. So the work flows from one Parliament to the next. And that's because it's a standing committee as guided by the standing order. Secondly, in terms of composition of the Parliament, of the Public Accounts Committee, it will have, as guided by standing order, not less than 6 and not more than 9 members. The practice has been for it to have 9 members, of which 5 comes from the government and 4 from the opposition, in keeping with the standing order, because over the parliaments before, the accepted number was 9 in total. I see no reason to remove from that, and I believe that it will still be 5 from government and 4 from the opposition. In terms of the recommendations that were made, the recommendations would usually go to the full house of the assembly, and once that is debated and accepted, it then becomes a resolution of the house, and the Minister of Finance is to prepare a treasury memorandum and lay it before the National Assembly within 3 months or 90 days. And it is expected of the Ministry of Finance to ensure through the Finance Secretary that the recommendations are implemented. What I can tell you is that the last report that went to the National Assembly from the Public Accounts Committee after examining Auditor General's report was the 2016 Auditor General's report. The report from that, the Treasury Memorandum from 2016, was laid in the Assembly. 2017, 2018, and 2019 are the years that we consolidated, and we have not completed that in full as yet. And that will have to, after completion, be laid before the National Assembly before a Treasury Memorandum is circulated or is accepted by the House. So that's how it works. The Public Accounts Committee doesn't have the authority to institute any sort of measure. What they have the authority to do is to cross-examine, re-examine, and find out. And based on their findings at the PAC level, they then put recommendations in a report and submit that to the full house. The full house then debates that. And after that, whether it is accepted or not, assuming it is accepted and it becomes a resolution of the House, the Minister of Finance then has to go and form that Treasury Memorandum and bring it back to the House in 90 days. I trust that answers your question.
Well, yes, I can conclude that none of the recommendations have been implemented so far. So what would be the role of Jermaine Figueroa then?
Well, Jermaine Figueroa is no longer a member of parliament, so he will no longer play a part in the Public Accounts Committee. But I can tell you that the Auditor General report, as I said in the press statement, indicated that 35 or 19% of the recommendations they had given in the 2023 report were completely ignored. 96 or 54% were partially implemented, and 48 or 27% were fully implemented. But when you look at the 48 or 27% that were fully implemented, those were basically some statutory things that should have happened in the first place, like ensuring logbooks are properly dated and logbooks are followed. Though we see, for example, that overpayments were recovered, the point is overpayments should never happen in the first place, because the system that government funds work with is you are paid for measured work. So even though you may have a contract that is valued $150 million, let's put a hypothetical situation. You got a contract for $150 million. But when you execute the work and you complete the work, the engineer goes there and he measures the work that was done. And if it comes up to $140 million in total for the measured work, then that is the sum of money you should be paid. You should not be paid the $150 million. So to ensure you're paid for measured work, it requires the engineers to go and measure the work. So when the Auditor General now pulls that very project and use his engineers to examine the project, when his engineers measure, they must find the measured work as $140 million equivalent. If they find that they measure it and it's 140 million, but the contractor was given 150 million, it means that the engineer, the ministry, permanent secretary, and all the other staffing there that processes these documents, some forgery happened, and that's how the contractor was given 150 million. What we are saying here in essence is that if you are only doing a sample audit and you're finding billions of dollars in overpayment, can you imagine if you do a full audit, how much millions or billions have been gone towards overpayment and in the pockets of others? And we don't know. That is why we're calling for deeper audits into these ministries and regions and departments where you find overpayments from your sample audit. I trust I answered you there.
Adam, if I might add briefly that a responsible government would not await the entire process in the Public Accounts Committee that then ends up in a Treasury memorandum, but a responsible government would act immediately once the Auditor General report is released, act immediately to rectify the deficiencies that have been identified. If we're to narrow this, and you know I like narrowing it to a corporation or a company, when the auditors issue the external auditors issue their report, and any deficiencies that are identified, a responsible management team will jump on it quickly and start to address it before the board meeting. So similarly, I'm submitting that a responsible government, once an Auditor General's report has been released, would act on the deficiencies identified, the overpayments, and the expired drugs, all the other things that have been identified in those reports, and seek to correct it. But every single year, we have reports coming out showing that the government failed to follow up. And I think this is an indictment on the government of disregarding standards of good public accounting and financial practices.
Thank you for that question. Mr. Harris, I notice your hand is still raised. Do you have another question?
Yes, I do.
Please
and
proceed.
This is for Mr. Campbell on the Natural Resource Fund. I noticed and I expected the Auditor General, the Attorney General to say that, well, that bill cannot be discussed because the matter is still before the court. Do you hold that position? Or, because I believe the case is finished and you're just waiting for the result. Does that mean that it can't be discussed?
I'm happy that you raised that issue, Adam. I'll deal with it. First of all, let me say that I don't hold the view that it can't be discussed. And the Auditor General raised issues of the separations of power doctrine and so on. And the Attorney General, sorry, and he is completely wrong on that issue. He then referenced standing orders and speakers' rulings. And I don't know, I'm not sure how active you are on social media, Adam, but I was made aware of his claims yesterday. And I did respond with a Google search, only because I was busy. And he made that a big point of criticism. But last night, I referenced Erskine May, which is the parliamentary practice, which is the Bible of parliamentary practice, which is the Bible or Quran or Bhagavad Gita of parliamentary practice. It is what the speaker will refer to for guidance, especially when things are unclear. And on the issue of sub judice matters, the sub judice matters, the Erskine May says very clearly, the rules governing sub judice do not apply to bills. It is clear, measures or delegated legislation. We don't need to go on. It does not apply to bills. Those rules apply to motions and questions. But even on the issue of motions and questions, if the motions and questions relate to matters of national importance, especially economic matters, they can be discussed. Let me also say that the ruling on the matter was expected on October 6th, and it has now been set for a date in December. So, and it's the first time I'm disclosing this. In advancing the matter, Adam, I am passionate about what is happening, and the APNU is passionate as well, about what is happening with our oil revenues. Oil revenues come from a non-renewable source. When it's done, it's done. If I give you $10 million, Adam, I won't expect you to go spending all of it. I would expect you to invest it so it can provide you an income for the long haul. Similarly, the oil revenue, which comes from a non-renewable source, the expectation, once we got it, I remember when we discovered oil, many people were saying, oh, we're going to spend the money out, it's all going to disappear, it's going to be gone in corruption. We in the APNU are very passionate. We want to ensure that oil money is spent responsibly. And so there is the matter of the court hearing. But as with court hearings, you're depending on lawyers, how they argue your case and so on. So when I put forward the bill for the matter to be discussed, an amendment to be discussed in the National Assembly, I was well aware that that matter could not come up until after the court case would be heard. So even the Attorney General's argument that, listen, that this matter, even if we were to take it as correct, and it's not, and I'm quoting, where I quoted for you is page 582 of Erskine May's Parliamentary Practice.
25th edition.
So, but even if we took it as correct, from a very pragmatic and practical standpoint, I already knew that the matter would not come up before judgment had been delivered in the case. And it is on these grounds that sometimes I wonder about our Attorney General and how competent he really is. So to answer your question, the case will be decided, as far as I know, in December, unless the acting chancellor decides to delay the decision again. But there is nothing stopping the bill from advancing to debate in the parliament. Absolutely nothing. And I stand by what I've quoted from Erskine May's Parliamentary Practice. I don't know what the Attorney General is standing on.
And let me add something to what my brother Terrence said. When you look at this separation of power, you look at the National Assembly, which has, in layman terms, the National Assembly makes laws. The executive, they implement those laws. And the judiciary, they will interpret those laws. So what we have before us is a law that was passed by the National Assembly and assented to by the President. And the court matter is a matter relating to that existing law. Nothing, therefore, stops the National Assembly from revisiting the law and table amendments as they see fit to further strengthen the law. It doesn't hamper the court proceedings, nor does it hamper what is filed there in the court, because that action was filed with the current law in its current form. And if we choose to see or act in a manner to amend any law that is existing until that amendment is passed, that's the only time it takes effect. The law is in place at this point in time. And that is why bills are not subjected to the sub judice rule, so to speak. And Terrence rightly said that he's quoting Erskine May. It is the 25th edition of Erskine May. I think there's only one edition that is older than the 25th. I think Erskine May is at its 26th edition. But the 25th edition is what he quoted, and it's very explicit, which is the Bible that guides parliamentary democracies around the world.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yes, Ms. Dr. Campbell, there is Shabral,
Listen. While we wait on Mr. Shabal to fix his technical issues, are there any other questions?
Did you hear the question?
No, not at all. We didn't hear the question.
Oh, I'm asking, I'm saying that I saw your release earlier today concerning Coursera. So my question is, what will the APNU's, what is the APNU planning to do with respect to that issue in the National Assembly?
Well, to answer your question, Dennis, let me say to you that the release is what we have put out so far, and we have a scheduled meeting with all our MPs to tackle it, whether we're going to tackle it from the format of a motion, whether we're going to tackle it from the format of several questions, or whether we're going to tackle it from direct engagement with the government ministry to ascertain more and to put our position out there clearer to the respective ministries and so on. We are yet to fashion that in terms of how, but what we have released is our position on the matter at this point in time. And we are still going to explore the option of, and I've said this several times, that nothing takes away from us actually engaging directly as we had done previously in the single window bill. As you would remember, there was a single window bill that the government brought, and in that bill there were several issues that we had, and we made it known to the public. We subsequently met with the subject ministers. At that time was housing and water, and we ended up with a powerful piece of legislation that benefited or should be benefiting this entire country. And I think it's on the same basis we're going to approach this matter with Coursera.
Dennis, if I may just add to what Ganesh has said, I think the concern here is a value for money in terms, because we're paying for people to get certifications through Coursera, but how valuable are these certifications? How much are they really adding to what we want in terms of developing our human capacity here in Guyana? And this is related to the broader question of which I've also raised similarly about goal earlier, and then it was revealed that ISDC was not actually affiliated with Staffordshire University, and it relates to, it's all in keeping with what happened to that money that we would have paid ISDC and what attempts have been made to recover it. So we're taking a look at that. It is very important. The development of our human capacity in Guyana is very important for us, for our non-oil economy, and even for our oil economy. We want to make sure that citizens have the right skills. Too often we have to look externally for the skills that we need to help in developing the country. And our general question about Coursera is whether it is fit for purpose at this point in time. And as Ganesh said, we will discuss it in our parliamentary team and decide on the next steps of addressing what we see as a deficiency at this point.
Thank you. Are there any other questions at this moment?
Yeah.
Please proceed.
Yeah. So my question has to do with along the same line. Now we have all these gold scholarships. Is anyone in a position to say how many of the gold scholarship recipients, well, not the graduates, have gained employment in any sector? And I ain't talking about me working here and I get a scholarship and I continue to work here. I'm talking about this qualification, this graduate degree, whatever it is, being accepted as an education qualification in any part of the society.
So Adam, I have some concerns, and I did, and I think I was one of the first people to break the news about deficiencies with the gold scholarship back in January. Let me say, so I can't answer your question. The government alone might be in possession of that data, but from the small sample size that I have used, a lot of people who took the gold scholarships or were awarded the gold scholarships, they were already working. My sample size is very small. They were already working. Some of them shifted jobs once they were done. For me, the big issue back in January, and it remains an issue now, is that some of the institutions under the gold scholarship that are the training institutions, the universities, I don't believe that the certificates are worth the paper that they're written on. I will say, in fairness to the government, I'm not just here to criticize, that, and I have followed up with people who left the Staffordshire program and they are now in alternative programs, that those programs were much better than what ISDC was offering at Staffordshire. But I think we need to take, and I recommended back in January, and I do so now, that we take a look, a real in-depth look. And the government is notorious of hiding stuff. I think a broad-based committee of educators and maybe business people who will have to hire the graduates and so on should be put together to look at the output of the gold scholarship. Many of them, and they leave questions. There were questions about people earning PhDs in very, very short time frames and so on. I think it's time. I support the program. I am someone who, my first post after I had to leave the University of Guyana because I didn't have enough money to continue on the law program, my first training, tertiary training after that was the Chartered Insurance Institute. I sat down with a book in Guyana, I studied that book, and I wrote the exams. Many people studied for the Chartered Association of Certified Accountants. Distance learning can deliver real skills. But so I support the idea of gold scholarships, but I'm calling for us to really take a look, institution by institution, program by program, to see whether the gold scholarships are delivering what we need. In the same way as we're calling for a re-examination of Coursera courses, that we do this for the graduate programs, especially under the gold scholarship. Let us examine course by course institution by institution, and make sure that we are getting value for money.
And just to add to that too, Dennis, is the fact that there is a cost that is going to be associated to this, and several other programs I've noticed that government is pushing for. It comes with a cost. Can only mean, in my estimation, that they will be coming to the National Assembly with a supplementary paper requesting funds, and we will have to drill those requests with questions to get to the bottom and to get answers reference to these programs. Of course, the whole Staffordshire issue will come up again as we question this one, and we will have to talk about knowing the cost, the procurement method, the expanded number of beneficiaries, the criteria for participation, the evaluated framework or the data protection arrangement for public servants, and all that you have seen in the press release that was made, the letter that came from member Sharon Duncan. So we will be drilling, I am sure, when these financial papers come, requesting the sums of money to facilitate the expenditure.
Thank you. I see the hand of Ms. Williams. Please proceed with your question.
Hi, good morning, Trina Williams, Guyana Chronicle. My question is directed to Mr. Campbell. A few weeks ago, Mr. Norton would have made note that you are now a member of the PNC, but he stopped short of saying when you became a member. Could you say when you joined the party and what faction are you part of or group?
I joined a while ago, Trina, and my group should be the Alberton group.
When you say a while ago, could you give us a date, perhaps?
I can't remember offhand exactly what date I joined.
Okay, and could you say when the next PNC Congress will be held?
That is
or
way
expected to be held?
Trina, as a new member of the PNC, that one is way above my pay grade. I don't even think my senior, Mr. Mahipaul, might be able to advise on that.
But I want to say that these are matters that are internal to the PNCR. We have allowed ourselves over the last 5 years, I would say, to engage and entertain matters that are really internal issues of the PNCR. Our membership is an internal issue. Our Congress is an internal issue that is decided on by its membership. And anybody who has a vested interest in knowing the operations, the dealings, and the movements of the PNCR, there is an open process. Once you're screened and accepted, you can become a member and participate in our Congress, participate in our groups, and help build our party or help strengthen our party from strength to strength and play a role as we move forward together as a PNCR body.
And just one follow-up from me there on the same congressman. Mr. Campbell, if you are nominated, would you contest for leadership of the party?
That, Ms. Williams, that is hardly my focus at this point in time. My focus right now is working with the parliamentary delegation to make sure we are a vigorous opposition, that we hold the government accountable in every single area. The people of Guyana have said to us in our outreach activity that they expect us to vigorously represent them, and that's what we're there to do. And outside of that, it is also another secondary focus is on parliamentarians engaging with their constituents across the country. I have put on blinders, Ms. Williams, so I don't have much peripheral vision. All I'm focused on is vigorous representation, holding the government's feet to the fire in Parliament and outside of Parliament, and engaging with the constituents to ensure that our party improves its performance at the next election. That is all I'm focused on. I'm not focused on leadership at this point.
Dr. Campbell, just a follow-up. With respect to when you became a PNC member, was it within the last 6 to 8 months? I'm not asking for a date.
Dennis, as I said to the students, I don't remember exactly when I became a member. I know that
I'm not asking for an exact date.
I know,
I'm asking for a time
I'm
period.
answering you though. I'm saying that I'm now a full-fledged member of the PNCR. My blood was always green. I went to Bishop's High School, and it's greener now that I'm a member of the PNC. And that's a matter internal to the PNC when I became a member. I don't think it's a matter for public consumption at this point.
Dennis, would you like to know when I became a member?
Why should all these issues be internal to the PNC when it's supposed to be a big party and which the wider public has interest?
Yeah, but for me, what the wider public needs to know is that at this point is that I believe in the goals, objectives, and so on of the PNCR and its coalition, the APNU, and that I am fully committed. I am all in relation to those goals and objectives in rebuilding this party for improved electoral performance. That's all the wider public needs to know. My blood is greener at this point.
How do you determine what the wider public needs to know?
Dennis, you asked a question and I gave you an answer. This is part of the trust and party of journalists and anybody that they're questioning. I'll give you my answer. There's nothing more that I will add to that. I am fully committed to the ideals, goals, and objectives of the PNCR at this point in time.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Proceed,
Mr.
Mr.
Campbell,
Harris.
you talked about your outreach programs and all of this. Just over a week ago, I saw a team meeting with defenders from Freedom Hope. Earlier, I saw you meeting with residents in various communities and listening to their complaints. And in some cases, they actually hinted that they voted for the government, but they are now dissatisfied. When you get this information, sir, how are you going to use it to keep the government's foot to the fire?
So when we go on outreaches, and I'm not gonna discuss in great detail everything that we do on outreaches, but a big part of it is listening. And it's more focused on listening in relation to listening to inform the strategy of the APNU. What do they like about the APNU? What don't you like? What do you like about the other parties? How did you vote? Why did you vote in that way? So this is some of it. And then we collate that data to inform our strategy. I'm not going to say what the data has shown, but as part of that process, we also usually ask about issues in their communities and what are the pressing issues. And that is usually shared in a group. Sometimes we will have this raised in the media. You will see us use even future press conferences to raise some of these issues in the media. Sometimes I know, for example, there was someone who was not getting the social assistance and Ganesh, Comrade Ganesh, and MP Ganesh, and one of our other outreach team members, they agreed to follow up with the relevant government agency. And so you're going to see, and this is evolving, Adam. The goal is to the goal is to have an MP office. So not only when we go on outreaches where people can come to meet us, and we will listen to their issues and their problems, and we will work where we can help immediately, we will do so, and where government assistance is required, we'll follow up with the government on their behalf. So, and we will also make the issues, ventilate them in the public via this press conference and other means, our Facebook pages and so on. So that's the nature of the outreach at this point in time.
Before you go,
Sir,
no, if it's a follow-up, go ahead. I was going to raise another issue.
Go on, Adam.
It's all right. I was going to ask Mr. Campbell a rather personal question.
Go ahead.
Okay. Now, what you're doing is more or less a full-time job. You're also a man operating a very successful business. How are you managing to do both?
You have strength.
Adam, I go to bed tired and I wake up tired. And that is the absolute truth, because this is political work is indeed a full-time job. As soon as I leave here, I am racing with PR down to Perico to jump on a boat to head to the Essequibo coast. I've done something that I have never done before. I allowed another MP to drive my car to take it to the Essequibo coast. So I would say that it has had its impacts. I have at least 2 new businesses, and both of them require attention. One of them is not doing as well as I thought it would do. The other one is booming. But boom also requires attention. And the truth is, I'm not getting to give them as much attention as I should. But I want to say to you, Adam, and say to our viewing audience, that I have come to the point in life, I am of that independence generation, and I have looked at Guyana since independence, and I do not believe that we are where we need to be. We're not where we need to be in terms of civility. We're not where we need to be in terms of financial accountability. We're not where we need to be in our ethnic relations. And the list goes on. So what is important? I ask myself, what will be my legacy, before I go to fertilize daisies? Do I want to leave a Guyana the same way I met it 60 years ago? Or will I now, having achieved a certain level of success in business, focus on bringing about change? And for example, one thing that bothers me greatly is the fact that 50% of our students who go through secondary school never matriculate. And that has had its impacts, and that is deliberate. It's had its impacts in this election. That so many people, to my mind, were unable to really assess what was happening. So for me, the most important thing at this point is the work that I'm doing in the political domain. And if that comes at a cost to business, so be it. Because what I want to see is change in Guyana. As part of my legacy, I want to see change in Guyana. And so I've been fortunate to be invited to the APNU team and to be working with a wide group of really dedicated people on the parliamentary team and in the party who are truly concerned about Guyana and our youths. And so that's my priority at this point. Trying to make real change in Guyana. Business is secondary.
Thank you. We have a question in-house. Please go ahead.
Mr. Mahipaul, Antonio Day from 19 News. Just to bring to your attention that the Plaisance market is currently in a deplorable state, as vendors have declared unsanitary conditions. Mr. Mahipaul, Antonio Day from 19 News. Just to bring to your attention that the Plaisance market is currently in a deplorable state because vendors have declared unsanitary conditions. As the Shadow Minister of Local Government and Regional Development, does your party intend to engage these vendors, although the minister has already vowed to address the situation?
Well, the short answer is yes. We cannot not engage with the vendors who are affected. We've had similar situations in Region 3, as was referenced earlier, where several vendors faced significant difficulties in terms of applying their trade, especially at this Christmas season. And we do intend to engage the vendors of the Plaisance market, but not just Plaisance market. We will engage vendors across Guyana because there are several monies in the budget, last budget and the one before, to improve markets across the country. Here in Georgetown alone, I think it was Border Green, La Penitence Market, about 4 or 5 markets in the budget to be improved. And we're here in December now, we're heading into December. And I don't think the work was done the way it was supposed to be done with the billions of dollars that were put there for the purpose. So we intend to drill on that and also engage the vendors. I can assure you that. I wanted to raise a separate issue. I want to raise a separate issue that I just received 2 other messages from 2 separate individuals reference to the issue, which I have been tracking. And I think it's fitting for me to bring it to the attention of the public. And that is to call on Minister Gail Teixeira to stop interfering with the budget submissions of constitutional agencies. Constitutional agencies across Guyana are complaining that they are making their proposals for budget 2026. They're in that period. And by law, they make their submissions to the Minister of Finance, after which the Minister of Finance will allocate the funding that he, in his interest, is that he sees the country can afford. So if a constitutional agency is requesting $9 billion and the Minister of Finance is of the opinion that the country can only afford $8 billion, then he will allocate the $8 billion to the constitutional agency. But the constitutional agency's submissions must not be interfered with by Minister Gail Teixeira. Let the constitutional agencies make their submissions. And whatever is their submission, the government will facilitate how much they can, if all or some. But you, as Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance, you cannot collect the budgets, the proposals from these constitutional agencies, and as you think is necessary to slash, reduce, and tell them to go back and come back and make submissions to capture an amount that you are satisfied with or your government is satisfied with, that is interfering with the functions of constitutional agencies. If you want to play that role, if your government, Minister Teixeira, wants to play that role, then all you got to do is take away constitutional authority from them and make them a subvention agency or make them a budgeted agency under the control of a minister. But do not interfere with the constitutional agencies and their submissions. Let them submit what they want. And whatever your government can facilitate, they will facilitate. But stop slashing their submissions. Please.
Ms. Williams, please proceed with your question.
Yes, coming back to my questions, Mr. Campbell, I have a follow-up there about today's admission to being a member of the PNC. It's just a few months ago, you were positioning yourself as this neutral interlocutor for this grand coalition, promising the AFC to break the hands of Mr. Norton. I think the public would want to know, were you negotiating between the APNU and the AFC while quietly operating with this undisclosed political allegiance?
I was negotiating as a neutral interlocutor. In fact, if you follow public commentary, many people believe that I was AFC. I was not. So I was negotiating as a neutral interlocutor. And let me also add, because there's in the public domain, there's the AFC and the APNU. They met for months without any intervention. I had nothing to do with it. And in fact, Comrade Ganesh was a member of the APNU team. They, my only intervention came at a point where it seemed quite difficult for them to arrive at agreement on a coalition. And I did and it's in the public domain that one side was asking for 60-40, the other was, I think, offering 70-30. And they did in a pragmatic business way, suggest 65-35, and there was indication that it would have been accepted by the APNU. They later confirmed that they were willing to accept that given the 35%, 65-35, but ultimately there was no agreement on that from the AFC team, and there were events that overtook the negotiations that would then prevent a grand coalition.
Are there any other questions?
Dr. Campbell, I'm going back on one of my earlier questions with respect to your membership in the PNC or the PNC. Is it that you not want to disclose the date because in the event that you would run for a leadership of the party, you do not want to be regarded as a just cause?
Dennis, I said previously that my focus is not on leadership of the party. And so if my focus is not on leadership of the party, that could hardly be the reason that I do not want to disclose the date of my membership. I haven't seen in the public domain any other people who have joined the PPP. We've had Tandy McAllister, James Bond. You know, I haven't seen anybody else being questioned in this great detail about the date that they joined. And mind you, Dennis, I take no offense to the question. You're doing your job, and I am doing mine. But I'm saying I don't think I believe that there's ever been any such great interest in when somebody joins a party. And, Mr. Norton declined. He is the leader of the party. He declined when asked to specify a date as to when I joined the party. And similarly, I am declining to say exactly when I joined the party. But let me repeat, my focus is not on leadership of the party. It's about doing the work that needs to be done. So it cannot be the reason that I intend to run for leadership when that's not my focus at this point in time.
Are there any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. I'll make an observation first. Look, Mr. Campbell, in this day and age, and particularly during the last elections, we saw the whole question of self-gratification, where people reached out for money to satisfy themselves as opposed to the greater good. You're doing the exact opposite. You are saying, look, perhaps I have enough to live and I am not going to go grabbing, I'm doing political work. What really caused you to become the person you are as opposed to someone just grabbing money? And I ain't talking about government ministers and all of that. You, Mr. Terrence Campbell, Dr. Terrence Campbell.
Adam, let me say that it costs me more to be in the political domain than I will never recover what it's costing me to be in the political domain in terms of material wealth. I have said it before that I was born in absolute poverty, what I suspect must have been absolute poverty, in Madhya in 1964. I'm not going to touch a lot on that journey because it's not something I've disclosed publicly. and I don't think I want to disclose it today. But I've been blessed along in that journey, Adam, by a loving family, and I think you know my uncle, Henrik Ellis, Dudley Ellis, you were in Jamaica together. I ended up being blessed by a loving family. After high school, I went to University of Guyana, and I did first year law. 2 years before my year, the government used to pay the economic costs for law students, so it didn't really cost that much. The year before me, they stopped paying the economic costs, but they would still give money, I think it was about 3-1, the official exchange rate. By my year, the economic costs was no longer being paid, and you couldn't get foreign currency at the official rate. My father had just retired as a public servant, and there was no way that what his gratuity was going to be able to cover me. And so I made a decision, and I was their only child. And I made a decision that I said to my parents, I said, if you spend this money, first of all, it can't take us through to Trinidad, even if I stayed at my uncle in Barbados, who you know very well. I said, even if we went through Barbados, there's not enough money to go to Trinidad. So I'm going to go out on my own. I found a job at the Hand in Hand, and I worked there for 6.5 years. I went into business. One of the things that I decided back then, though, was that I was going to make sure that I could educate my children, and I was going to make sure that I could help others to get an education. And it's really from that foundation of knowing what it is not to have. I was never the beneficiary of a government scholarship at the tertiary level. Everything about my education I paid for personally. And over the years, I've helped many people to go to medical school, some people less to go to law school, people to go through at Camex restaurants and at Camex Limited. We paid regularly for people to do their entire degrees, to get master's degrees from UE and so on. Never ever, until maybe the last year I was leaving, asking them to sign any contract. I saw someone in a news item over the last week who has a very senior job at Exxon, and the person spoke of doing an MBA at UE. That MBA was paid for by my company without ever asking the individual to sign a contract. It is in that broader vein of service beyond self, that broader vein of knowing that I have been almightily blessed beyond measure in this life, and somewhat unjustified. Many times I ask myself, why me? Why I've been blessed in this way? And it's in that vein of wanting to give back that I decided to enter the political domain.
When I talk to Dudley, I can tell he got a good nephew.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions at this time? But there being no other questions, this hearing concludes today's press conference. I want to thank the members of the media